Hollywood has created countless stars. Some burn bright and fade. But once in a lifetime, there comes someone different. Someone whose story isn't written in fame, but in scars. That someone is Keanu Reeves. To millions, he's Neo in the Matrix. John Wick fighting against impossible odds. But behind the fame lies a life marked by heartbreak, a father who vanished, a childhood filled with chaos, dreams crushed before they began. And later, the kind of tragedies that most of us can hardly imagine: the loss of a child, the death of the woman he loved, and years spent watching his sister battle illness. And yet, through it all, Keanu didn't break. He endured. He transformed grief into compassion, silence into strength, and pain into a legacy of kindness. To understand the man behind the legend, we have to start at the beginning, with a boy growing up in broken homes, carrying wounds that would one day shape the world's most unlikely hero. Keanu Reeves was born on September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon, far from the bright lights of Hollywood. His name carried poetry, Keanu, from Hawaiian, meaning cool breeze over the mountains. But that poetry was quickly buried under turbulence. His father, Samuel Reeves Jr., walked out when Keanu was only 2. By the age of 13, their last meeting ended without words, a silence that stretched into decades. That absence carved a wound that never fully healed. His mother, Patricia Taylor, tried to keep life afloat. A costume designer from England, she uprooted the family from Beirut to Sydney, then New York, and finally Toronto. At every stop, there were new schools, new strangers, new stepfathers who never stayed. Home was never permanent, just a pause before the next departure. The only constant was his younger sister, Kim. In her, Keanu found the proof that family could be more than a word in transit. School brought little refuge. Dyslexia made reading a war with every page. Teachers misunderstood his restlessness, one even expelling him for asking too many questions. That label, difficult, misunderstood, would follow him long after the classroom. Yet, hockey gave him escape. As a goalkeeper, he was nicknamed The Wall, admired for his reflexes and grit. He dreamed of the Ontario Hockey League, even the Olympics. For a boy without a stable home, hockey became his sanctuary. But at 15, a devastating injury crushed that dream overnight. For Keanu, it wasn't just the end of a sport. It was another reminder of how quickly life could take away the things you love. These early wounds shaped him. An absent father gave him empathy for the abandoned. Dyslexia taught patience. The carousel of stepfathers showed him that trust must be earned. And the collapse of his hockey dream pushed him toward another stage: acting. His childhood wasn't a prelude to stardom. It was the furnace where resilience and humility were forged. When the roar of the rink disappeared, Keanu searched for a new identity. Acting was unexpected, even ironic. A boy who struggled to read now, chasing a profession built on scripts. Yet what once seemed weakness became his strength. Acting didn't demand speed. It demanded truth. And Keanu, with his scars and questions, carried truth in abundance in Toronto. He took whatever work came his way. Canadian TV roles, commercials, even hosting a kids' show. These weren't glamorous jobs, but they were stepping stones. One early break came with a Coca-Cola commercial, where he played a cyclist gulping down soda with underdog determination. For Keanu, it wasn't just a paycheck, it was survival, and proof that he belonged somewhere. By the mid-1980s, armed with little more than a battered Volvo and a suitcase, Keanu drove to Los Angeles. Imagine it, a young man with no connections, no polish, and a name casting agents could barely pronounce. Arriving in the world's toughest industry, many would have quit after a handful of rejections. But rejection was familiar terrain to Keanu. He kept going. His breakthrough came with River's Edge, 1986. A bleak indie film where his raw performance caught critics' attention. Soon after, Permanent Record, 1988, pushed him further, playing a grieving teen. These roles felt real because they were real. He wasn't faking sorrow. He was channeling the grief that had shadowed him since childhood. But Hollywood has a cruel sense of humor, just as he was proving himself. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1989, made him a household name. As Ted, the goofy time traveler, Keanu became beloved, but also typecast. Suddenly, he was the airhead surfer dude. For years afterward, directors doubted whether he could handle serious roles. This is the paradox of early success. The role that puts you on the map can also box you in. For Keanu, it was déjà vu. In school, he'd been mislabeled. Now, Hollywood was repeating the mistake. But he didn't complain. He kept working, showing range in overlooked films, pushing forward quietly. One saving grace in this period was friendship. On the set of My Own Private Idaho, 1991, Keanu met River Phoenix. Their bond went beyond acting. Two outsiders finding family in each other. For a boy raised on instability, this friendship was rare, sacred. And yet, even with friendship and small victories, Keanu was still Hollywood's outsider. Casting directors didn't know what to make of him. Leading man or misfit? Star or drifter? But with each rejection, each stereotype, Keanu proved something more important than stardom. He proved endurance. The boy who had lived out of suitcases was now learning to carry his true home inside himself. Persistence, humility, and the refusal to quit. By the early 1990s, Keanu Reeves was no longer just another young actor drifting through auditions. He had survived rejection, shaken off labels, and begun carving a place in Hollywood. But with every step forward came new shadows. Fame was calling, and it would test him more than failure ever had. His first major leap came with Point Break, 1991. As Johnny Utah, a rookie FBI agent infiltrating a gang of thrill-seeking surfers, Keanu captured the paradox that defined him. Danger laced with sincerity. The film paired him with Patrick Swayze, and their chemistry elevated what could have been a standard action flick into a cult classic. Suddenly, audiences saw more than the goofy Ted. They saw someone capable of carrying adrenaline and depth in the same role. Then came Speed, 1994. Cast alongside Sandra Bullock, Keanu delivered a performance that cemented him as a bona fide action star. The chemistry between the leads made the film unforgettable. Speed wasn't just a blockbuster. It was the movie that vaulted him into the stratosphere. Overnight, Reeves went from outsider to global phenomenon. But here's where his story diverges from the typical Hollywood arc. When the studio dangled a fortune in front of him for Speed 2, Keanu said no. He believed the script lacked substance, and he wasn't willing to trade integrity for profit. In an industry where many chase sequels and easy money, his refusal shocked everyone. Insiders whispered that he was reckless, arrogant, even foolish. To Hollywood, it looked like he was sabotaging his own career. But to Keanu, it was simple. If a story didn't feel honest, it wasn't worth telling. That decision drew a line in the sand. It defined him not as a star who would take every paycheck, but as an artist willing to sacrifice security for principle. Still, Hollywood is unforgiving. The mid-1990s became a proving ground filled with setbacks. Films like Johnny Mnemonic, 1995, and Chain Reaction, 1996, faltered at the box office. Critics sharpened their knives, dismissing him as stiff, limited, a pretty face with nothing behind the eyes. The Ted stereotype lingered like an unwelcome shadow. And then, fate handed him a role that would change everything, but at a brutal cost. In 1999, The Matrix premiered. The Wachowskis envisioned a film that fused philosophy with sci-fi spectacle. And they needed someone who could embody calm intensity while anchoring a revolutionary story. Keanu was their choice. What audiences didn't see was the sacrifice behind the sunglasses and trench coat. Months of martial arts training left him battered. Wire work twisted his body into knots. At one point, a spinal injury was so severe that doctors warned of paralysis. Yet Keanu pressed on, strapping himself into a neck brace and continuing to train. "I never wanted to let the audience down," he explained later. Those words weren't bravado. They were the quiet confession of a man who equated his craft with devotion. When The Matrix hit theaters, it wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural earthquake. Bullet time, red pills, and bending reality became part of everyday conversation. And at the center of it all was Keanu Reeves, transformed into a global icon. For once, the critics fell silent, and audiences embraced him not as an airhead or a fluke, but as a symbol of cool resilience. Yet success didn't erase the doubts. Even in the glow of The Matrix, headlines resurfaced old criticisms: wooden, limited, lucky. It was as if the ghosts of his past classrooms, the teachers who dismissed him, the principals who misunderstood him, had followed him into the industry. Fame had crowned him, but it had not freed him from the shadow of doubt. This is the irony of Keanu's life. Every breakthrough carried a hidden cost. Every cheer from the crowd echoed with hours of pain behind the scenes. When audiences saw Neo dodging bullets, they didn't see the man icing his spine after training, or the actor wincing through physical agony to give them something unforgettable. His victories were never clean. They were paid for in silence, in scars, in the kind of endurance most people never witness. And that's the hook that keeps us watching, because Keanu Reeves isn't just a star who rose effortlessly to the top. He's the man who had to fight, fall, and sacrifice at every step. A reminder that even the most spectacular success is built on hidden pain. If the 1990s gave Keanu Reeves fame, they also handed him wounds far deeper than anything critics or box office failures could inflict. To understand the man he became, we must walk with him through the shadows of friendship lost, love shattered, and family struggles that tested every fiber of his being. One of the brightest lights in his early career was River Phoenix. They met while filming My Own Private Idaho, 1991, a project that demanded vulnerability and honesty. River was fire, intense, restless, dazzling. Keanu was stone, grounding, steady, quietly protective. Together, they created a balance that felt unbreakable. More than co-stars, they became brothers. For Keanu, who had grown up in fractured homes, River was family, the kind he had longed for all his life. But in October 1993, tragedy struck. River collapsed outside the Viper Room in Los Angeles and never woke up. He was only 23. To Hollywood, it was the shocking death of a rising star. To Keanu, it was the theft of his other half. Friends say he didn't lash out or crumble in public. He went silent, carrying the grief privately. Later, he admitted he spent hours crying alone. That loss seeped into his work. Critics noted the weight in his performances, the way sorrow seemed to linger behind his eyes. It wasn't performance, it was memory. Then came love, and heartbreak on a scale few can fathom. In 1998, Keanu met actress Jennifer Syme. Their connection was immediate, tender, and real. For a man who had carried loneliness for so long, Jennifer represented hope. Together, they built a quiet life away from Hollywood's glare. In 1999, she became pregnant with their daughter, Ava. Keanu was overjoyed. For the first time, it seemed like he was about to have the family he had been denied as a child. But on Christmas Eve that same year, their daughter was stillborn. The nursery they had prepared became a shrine of absence. Tiny clothes folded neatly, a crib that would never be used. Friends recalled how Keanu carried the pain in silence, his eyes clouded with grief. He didn't rage or retreat into bitterness, but the wound was deep, and it lingered. As if that weren't cruel enough, fate struck again. In April 2001, Jennifer died in a car accident. Overnight, Keanu lost not only the woman he loved, but also the future they had dreamed of together. At her funeral, he carried her coffin on his shoulder, his face unreadable yet devastating in its restraint. Cameras captured the image, but they couldn't capture the silence of a man who had lost almost everything, and still, life pressed in with more trials. Around this time, his younger sister Kim was battling leukemia. For years, Keanu balanced red carpet premieres with nights in hospital rooms. Fans saw Neo bending bullets on screen. In reality, he was sitting beside his sister, reading to her during chemotherapy, holding her hand through exhaustion. He rearranged shooting schedules, turned down roles, and bought a house near her so he could be by her side at a moment's notice. Eventually, Kim went into remission, but the scars of that battle never left him. Most celebrities might have turned these tragedies into headlines or memoirs. Keanu did the opposite. He rarely spoke about his losses. Instead, he transformed them into action. Quietly, he founded a charitable foundation that funds cancer research and children's hospitals, deliberately keeping his name out of it. It wasn't charity for applause. It was gratitude, a way of honoring the doctors who helped Kim, and of sparing other families the helplessness he had endured. Here lies the paradox that makes Keanu Reeves so magnetic. Loss didn't make him bitter. It made him compassionate. Pain didn't break him. It softened him. The man most famous for playing indestructible warriors was, in reality, someone who had endured unimaginable fragility and turned it into empathy. That is why audiences don't just admire Keanu Reeves, they love him. His story reflects something deeply human, the knowledge that life can take everything from you, and yet you can still choose to respond with kindness. By the late 1990s, Keanu Reeves was standing at a crossroads. Hollywood had doubted him, mocked him, and at times written him off. Yet, destiny was waiting, and it came wrapped in black leather, dark sunglasses, and a single question. What is the Matrix? When the Wachowskis offered him the role of Neo, few could imagine how revolutionary the project would become. Studio executives hesitated, unsure if audiences would embrace a cyberpunk story, mixing philosophy, martial arts, and sci-fi spectacle. But Keanu didn't hesitate. He threw himself in completely, as if he somehow knew this film would demand everything of him and give everything back. Training was merciless. For months, he studied martial arts, wire work, and choreography. His body became a battlefield. At one point, he suffered a severe spinal injury that required surgery. Doctors warned him about the risk of paralysis. Most actors would have stepped back. Keanu, still wearing a neck brace, returned to training. He refused to hand the responsibility to stunt doubles. His reasoning was simple. He didn't want to let the audience down. When The Matrix exploded into theaters in 1999, it redefined cinema itself. Bullet time became a cultural phenomenon. Philosophical one-liners entered everyday conversation. And at the center stood Keanu, calm, precise, and impossibly cool. For once, critics had to admit he had silenced them. Audiences saw not just a star, but a symbol. Yet victory never came free. Behind the slow-motion battles was a man carrying real scars. Every leap, every kick, every twisted wire left its mark. Off-screen, he was often in pain. Fame had crowned him as Neo, but his body bore the cost. Years later, when most actors his age began fading into cameo roles, Keanu found rebirth in another unlikely role, John Wick. Released in 2014, the film was initially a modest revenge thriller. No one expected it to spark a global franchise, but Keanu transformed it into myth. He trained relentlessly again, drilling gun-fu sequences, live-fire shooting, judo, and jiu-jitsu until his body was covered in bruises. He practiced car stunts on racetracks until his joints ached. He refused shortcuts, again, choosing to take the punishment himself rather than delegate to doubles. By the time John Wick Chapter 4 arrived, he was in his late 50s, but still throwing himself into combat scenes that would exhaust actors half his age. Fans marveled at his precision. Doctors would have marveled simply that he could still walk. His knees were worn down, tendons stiff, and every movement carried the memory of decades of physical sacrifice. And then came the cruel reminder that no body can outrun time. On the set of Good Fortune, a comedy filmed in his 60s, he slipped during a cold immersion scene. His knee gave way with a crack he later described as like a potato chip breaking. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was symbolic. For decades, he had defied gravity, bullets, and age on screen. Now, his body was whispering the truth. Even legends have limits. What makes Keanu different is how he responds. He doesn't curse his body or rage against time. Instead, he adapts. Between projects, he shifts from punishing training to gentler routines. Swimming, walking, stretching. Recovery has become his ritual, a way of honoring the vessel that has carried him through so much pain. To fans, he will always be Neo dodging bullets and John Wick dismantling armies. But if you look closer, the truth reveals itself in the careful way he lowers into a chair. The subtle limp he tries to hide with a smile. The pauses between movements that carry weight. His legend was never about invincibility. It was about endurance. Every scar is proof of his devotion. Every slowed step is a reminder of sacrifice. Keanu Reeves' greatness isn't that he never falls. It's that he chooses, again and again, to rise and to keep giving everything, even when his body begs for rest. After decades of heartbreak, sacrifice, and relentless work, Keanu Reeves has learned that survival isn't just about fighting battles on screen. It's also about creating peace away from it. And so, high above Los Angeles, in the Hollywood Hills, he built something he had rarely known as a child, a sanctuary. His home is not the extravagant palace you might expect from a man who has earned hundreds of millions. Instead, it is quiet, minimalist, almost monastic. Glass walls open to sunlight. A koi pond glimmers in the courtyard, and a long lap pool offers calm rather than spectacle. Friends describe the space not as a display of wealth, but as a retreat for the soul. After years of chaos and loss, Keanu has finally given himself a place to rest. Here, he shares his life with artist Alexandra Grant. Their relationship grew not out of tabloid frenzy, but out of collaboration and friendship. They worked on books together before quietly falling in love. When they appeared publicly as a couple in 2019, it surprised the world. Not because Keanu was with someone, but because he had allowed this private corner of his heart to be seen. Their partnership is built on simplicity, shared meals, walks, and evenings of quiet creativity. It reflects his philosophy that intimacy doesn't need an audience. This approach extends to how he views fame. In an era when most stars live online, Keanu remains famously absent from social media. He rarely gives interviews, avoids the spotlight unless necessary. and appears only when his work demands it. His scarcity is deliberate. By not flooding the world with his image, he makes each appearance meaningful. It isn't detachment, it's wisdom. An understanding that true peace comes from protecting what matters. And yet, his private life is not just about retreat. It's also about giving back, quietly. He has donated millions to children's hospitals and cancer research through a foundation that carries no name. He's known to share profits with film crews, gift motorcycles to stunt teams, and perform small acts of kindness for strangers on the street. These gestures are not publicity stunts. They're extensions of his lived philosophy. Grief can either close you off, or it can open you up. For Keanu, every loss taught him to choose kindness. At 61, he no longer chases the invincible image of his younger self. He wears time, honestly. Long hair streaked with silver, a salt and pepper beard, a slower stride. He has shifted from chasing adrenaline to seeking balance. Swimming, reading, music with his band Dogstar, or simply enjoying quiet evenings with Alexandra. These are now his measures of success. This chapter of his life reveals something profound. Keanu Reeves' greatest role may not be Neo or John Wick. It may simply be himself. A man who has endured unimaginable loss, yet chosen humility, kindness, and simplicity as his answer. In an industry that rewards ego, he proves that gentleness can be just as powerful. When people speak about Keanu Reeves, they often begin with the Matrix or John Wick. They talk about the bullet-dodging savior of science fiction or the unstoppable assassin who rewrote modern action cinema. But if that's where we stop, we miss the truth. Keanu Reeves' real story isn't just about the characters he plays. It's about how he has lived through unimaginable loss and still chosen kindness. Think of the arc we've walked through. A childhood fractured by an absent father. A hockey dream stolen by injury. Years of being typecast as a one-dimensional Ted. The loss of his best friend River Phoenix. The stillbirth of his daughter. The death of Jennifer Syme. His sister's battle with leukemia. And the physical sacrifices he endured to give audiences unforgettable performances. Any one of these could have broken him. But together, they could have destroyed anyone. Yet Keanu Reeves didn't collapse. He endured. He transformed grief into generosity, silence into wisdom, pain into humility. While many in Hollywood use fame to amplify themselves, Keanu uses it to elevate others, whether it's donating quietly to hospitals, treating crews like family, or simply offering a seat on the subway. His actions prove that compassion is not weakness. It is strength. This is why Keanu is not just admired, he is loved. Fans around the world see themselves in him, flawed, wounded, but still moving forward. His story tells us something profoundly human, that suffering doesn't have to define us negatively. It can become the soil where kindness grows. At 61, Keanu Reeves no longer needs to prove himself. He has already left his mark on cinema. What he's building now is something greater, a legacy of humanity. In his long hair streaked with silver, his careful stride, and his gentle smile, we see not just a movie star, but a man who has made peace with life's storms. And maybe that's the lesson for us. We may never star in a blockbuster or perform gravity-defying stunts, but we all know grief. We all carry scars. The question is, what will we do with them? Will we let them harden us, or will we let them open us to others? Keanu Reeves shows us the path of endurance, not the kind that pretends everything is fine, but the kind that accepts pain and still chooses to move forward with grace. His life whispers a reminder, even in the darkest nights. Light can return. Even after the deepest losses, love can reemerge. So, As we close this journey, I want to ask you, what part of Keanu Reeves' story speaks to you the most? Is it his resilience in the face of tragedy, his humility in an industry of ego, or his quiet acts of generosity that ripple farther than any blockbuster? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because Keanu Reeves' story is not just his own, it is a mirror held up to ours, showing us that no matter what we endure, we too can rise, endure, and even choose kindness.